You could argue that the gains we're seeing in the stock market today are really due not so much to any clarification on who will run the Fed, but on something that happened last night. The Senate last night kickstarting Republicans' massive tax reform effort after passing a $4 trillion budget deal, 51 to 49, with Senator Rand Paul, the lone Republican, with the no vote. However, even though a fiscal year 2018 budget blueprint passed the Senate, both the House and the Senate still need to agree on this final budget resolution between their two different versions of the measure, with the House plan calling for revenue-neutral tax reform, meaning not adding to the deficit. That is a hard trick to pull off. Here to discuss the hurdles the GOP still needs to jump over, a Fox Business exclusive with Representative Tom Reed of New York, who serves on the House Ways and Means Committee. Welcome, Congressman. As a Republican, I want to just get right off to this. You must have been happy last night that the Senate is pushing it back to you all, but now you've got a big mountain to climb, and that is getting things revenue neutral on this budget. How are you going to do that? Because right now I've seen a lot of guesstimates that say it adds to the deficit.
Well, obviously last night was good news out of the Senate. They moved, and now we're going to take up that vehicle, and I'm very confident we'll get it to the finish line in the House. That sets up tax reform. And as you talk about revenue neutrality, obviously that's a difficult task. But the time is now, and the time is upon us to get this done for the American people. Well,
one way that you could get in more revenue to erase whatever debt is being compiled with these new plans is this so-called SALT plan. I guess, in essence, it's really for high-tax states, but it would affect all states, that they would eliminate the deduction for state and local taxes that people in New York and California and higher tax states have really depended on to kind of even out a very hefty tax bill overall. You are from the state of New York. Are you for eliminating this deduction or against it, like your fellow Republican compatriots in New York, Peter King, and a few others on the Democratic side?
Well, of course, when you talk about state and local tax deduction coming from New York, it's something I've made my thoughts known on from day one. But I do believe there's a solution to this problem. It's a $1.3 billion worth of score space that the state and local deduction represents. And what we need to do is maybe we can find the common ground where we can come to a compromise solution that stands for the hardworking taxpayers of the districts across New York, as well as in the city of New York. And I think there's a path there. And I'll tell you, there's been some very positive conversations amongst members that say, you know what, we got to get tax reform done for all Americans, but at the same time, we got to respect how this impacts the state and local tax deduction on our constituents that we represent in Washington.
I think what bothers a lot of people is that corporations would still be allowed to deduct it, but individuals couldn't. And when asked about that, President Trump said, well, you got to let corporations do it, otherwise they'll go out of business. If you don't let individuals do it, some of them may go bankrupt. I mean, this is an issue, but let's dovetail to the fact that people are now wondering about this fourth tax bracket that President Trump talked about a couple of weeks ago, but that Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, kind of confirmed today, this morning, in fact, during a television interview. What do you consider a high net worth level in a bracket that would be that fourth so-called tax on the wealthy?
Well, I was sitting right next to the president when he made the first public announcement about how the wealthy is not the goal of getting tax cuts to the wealthy as part of tax reform, that the wealthy may have to pay a little bit more even at the end of the day. And what we're talking about with this fourth bracket is to make sure we honor that mission, that we're going to relieve the tax burden on hardworking Americans that we represent across the nation. And when we talk about the highest bracket being put back into the mix, I think that's a legitimate recognition of where we stand. And let's face it, the other side has said repeatedly they want to make sure the top 1% pay their fair share. And you've seen Warren Buffett out there. Well, let's honor what Warren Buffett wants to do and pay a little bit more in order to get the relief for 300 million plus Americans.
Let me just interrupt you here for a moment, Congressman. You're looking at Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis and John McCain, the Republican senator from Arizona. They're standing, folks, this is breaking news, live pictures. They are standing outside Senator McCain's office. Brad, what are they talking about here? I can't hear.
Thank you.
They are talking about the Niger situation, the firefight on October 5th that killed four U.S. soldiers I just want to listen in because, of course, Senator McCain is head of the House Armed Services. The Senate Armed Services Committee.
Regular meetings so that we can work together in these very difficult and challenging times. I am proud to know him.
Secretary Mattis, would you say that it's a matter of days?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Secretary Mattis, would you say that it's a matter of hours or a matter of days or months?
Reporters are trying to get an answer about an investigation that is now being launched into that firefight where at least one serviceman was left behind for 48 hours in Niger after the firefight. And there was no answer as to a timeline for that. Representative Reed, did you hear that?
I did. That is news to me, and I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of it, because when we talk about our men and women that are in harm's way, it unites us as a country. Get to the bottom of anything that's occurring in order to make sure that we do our best to make sure they come home safe and sound in future events.
Absolutely. We want to thank you very much, Representative Tom Reed of New York.